Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Profitable Private Practice Podcast. And today we're with Mr. Nnamdi Chineme. How about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, and thanks for having me on. My name is Namdi, and I'm a businessman at heart, and my craft being tech. So I've been in the tech world for, I think, around about 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So I've done various things from building solutions for banks to sort of systems. I worked with some of the credit agencies like your Experian and the rest of them. Co-founded a few businesses as well myself, and yeah, more recently, I've been working with Dr. Ona on Practice Pilot.
That's beautiful. Okay, so then what are the problems that led you and Dr. Una to creating Practice Pilot?
All right, so that's an interesting story, and I'll probably take it back a few years. So, Dr. Una started her private practice round about the same time that I started a real estate marketing business. Um, for those of the listeners that don't know, Dr. Una is my sister. So we tend to have a lot of conversations about business. In fact, I think all our conversations are about business. Maybe at the end of the conversation, like, "Oh, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
But it's usually all about business. So we've over the years had a lot of conversations about our different businesses. I think I built the first, I call it the first website for Dr. Ona's practice because the first one was a monstrosity.
Oh.
Um, so, I've worked with her from a marketing perspective as well. So we've been quite close together from a business perspective. And one of the days we're having a conversation and we're talking about the metrics that she tracks in her practice to make sure that the the people working within the practice understand what the goal is and how they can achieve those goals. And we're talking through that, and then she says, "Oh, I can show you how we track it." And she shares her screen and she shows me this Excel spreadsheet with all sorts of, of numbers in it. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, because my a lot of the things I do in my world is taking inefficient systems and making them more efficient. And a lot of times we have taken complex spreadsheets that people use to track things and just convert them to an application that makes more sense. It's easier to use, allows you to see trends, and you don't need a degree in Excel to actually use and get some insight out of your data. Um, so I said to her, well, there might be a better way to track your metrics, right? And that's how it started, really. And then we started having conversation of, okay, what would that look like? So on that call, I just gave an idea, okay, it could look like this or that. And I think I told her, give me a second, and I shared my own screen and showed her an application I had been working for at the time. I'd been working on it for slightly over a year. And this was in the medical space in the UK in the sort of pharmacy sector. And I said, you could have this, or you could. So we're just having conversations and throwing ideas out there. And that's really how it started. So we decided to come together and build. Obviously, Dr. Ona's practice is the lab. That's where we, we test a lot of stuff and principles and frameworks. So we started that, yeah, today there's Practice Pilot out there.
There's Practice Pilot. All right, that's beautiful. And then, so who is Practice Pilot for?
So if you think about how we started it, Dr. Ona owns an insurance-based private practice in the US. So Practice Pilot essentially is for any private practice that is operating in the US that want to have a good handle on the financials of them. So the business of their business, should I say, because most time doctors focus on the medical side of things and you start to have gaps in the business side of running an actual practice.
Yeah. Okay. And then what is the ripple effect of not tracking data inside of your private practice?
So let's make it a bit more generic, like, because a private practice is a business at the end of the day, right? And for any business, if you're not tracking your data, you are running blind, right? You need to be able to connect the dots to say, if I pull this lever, that means my revenue will go up. If I pull
Yeah.
this other lever, that means my cost potentially go down. Because at the end of the day, the goal of a business is to make profit, right? And sometimes we use other words that kind of give us an excuse for not having some focus on profit. So in my own world in tech, that would be people referring to their businesses as startups. Usually, when somebody says a startup, it gives them an excuse to say, "Oh yeah, I can be making a loss for 10 years." And there are some businesses that have made losses, and then their revenue has ramped up significantly. Amazon would be a good example, but that isn't always the case. In most
Yeah.
cases, a business is there to make money, and you should start to make a profit as quickly as you possibly can. So sometimes if you say a private practice, it might excuse you from looking at the profit side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you're not tracking data in your business, you stand the risk of not paying attention to the key things like your profit, how much revenue you're making. Are you meeting the goals that you've set for yourself? Can you actually meet the goals that you've set? So that's the risk that people potentially face if they're not tracking data within their
They're not
business.
tracking data. Okay. And at least in my opinion, I presume that most physicians will think that this is another thing that they have to add to their already busy schedule. So is there anything you specifically did to make this, a very low lift, that they're not, doing a whole bunch of things?
Yeah, so I think practice policy is pretty much in line with the principles that Dr. Ona teaches. So essentially, her goal is to get practice owners to be able to make their business more profitable, bigger, but also they spend less time in their practice. So that
Mm.
principle applies to practice pilot as well. So while we're building it, we spent a lot of time making sure that whatever is required for anyone in the practice, not just the owner of the practice, it doesn't take much of their time to achieve that, and but at the same time they get huge value out of putting whatever data they need to put within practice pilot. So the way practice pilot works, there's a daily there's an end of day report where ideally a virtual assistant would go in and provide some data about how many patients each clinician saw, and the number of patients that are on the schedule for the next day. And that's all. And it literally takes about 30 seconds. If you've done it multiple times, it takes about 30 seconds to get through that. But even at that, we don't expect that it is the owner that does that. It should be probably the person that is working the front desk, or it should be a virtual assistant. But if that's not the case, the owner can actually, because it just is literally just 30 seconds. And then for the AR data, it's once a month, and that would probably take you about a minute or two, and that's it. So it's quite light touch. But ultimately, what you get on the other side of it is quite rich insight.
Okay. So then what do you have to do at the beginning of using Practice Pilot so that you get all of that information afterwards?
Yeah, so the process is when you sign up, as you go through the sign up process, the application will ask you key details about your practice. It would ask you how many locations you have, how many physicians you've got within the practice. And then for each physician, you tell the system what the working pattern of the physician is. Do they work 5 days a week or 2 days a week? When they work those days, is it 9 to 5, or is it I don't know, an 8 to 12? And that information is critical because it helps practice pilots work out what the capacity of a practice is.
Mm.
So that's the sort of information that is asked upfront. And once that data is in, it's a one-time thing that you put in, and you add all your clinicians. And then if you wanted to, you can add your biller, you can add um, your front desk person, you can also add your virtual assistants. And all those roles have different levels of access within the system for what they can see within the system. Um, so upfront, that's the sort of information that is asked.
Okay, that's good. It seems like a very, very low lift type of thing.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
did do a
yeah,
big assignment once, and then after that,
yeah.
you're living easy. Okay, so doctors use practice management systems, that already track data. So how is Practice Pilot different from the rest of them?
Yeah, so we get this we get this question a lot, and that because most people say, "Well, I've got an EHR that provides me a lot of data on my patient visits. There's some AR data in there, but if you think about it, the EHR is providing information of things that have happened in the past. You can't take any action on the past, right? Whereas practice pilot is proactive, is asking questions like, is forward thinking. What's your goal for the year? Let's start with your goal, right? I want to make, say, $1.2 million for the year. Then it's working out, right? You said you want to make $1.2 million. However, when we look at the clinicians that you've got within your practice, and when we work out the capacity based on their working patterns, how much revenue they bring in per visit on average, you might find that the capacity of the practice is 800,000. So it doesn't really matter what they do, they would not hit that goal, right? Now that asks the question: does the practice owner then go and recruit a new clinician, because that clinician might make up that gap? So that's a decision. The system starts to prompt the owners, or the practice owners, to make data-driven decisions, because it's all right to say, I have this goal, but the question
Mhm.
is, what does your practice need to become in order to hit that
Achieve.
goal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So I will guess. I know you mentioned it a little bit, but it's AI. There's AI in it. AI based a little bit.
Yeah, so that will be launching early next year. Where
Okay.
so at the minute, Practice Pilot would give you good insight on the capacity of your practice. It will give you trends about how you're performing and how you're progressing towards
Mhm.
that goal. So you might be in the, I don't know, the 8th week of the year, and it's telling you, well, based on where you are, you're already behind in terms of achieving the goal. Or it may also tell you the capacity of your practice is maybe 200K a month, but your practice is working below capacity, and you're bringing in 150 thereabout. And that's conversations that you can start to have internally, or actions you can start to take to make sure that you start to cover up that gap. um, in general, we'll be launching a whole, in early next year, rather, we'll be launching a whole new piece, which comes with Dr. Una's principles as the foundations for recommendations. So we're not only
Mm.
just showing you to say there's a gap between your goal and um, your capacity. The system is able to recommend, to say, based on the data that you've provided, you probably should take these kind of actions. So that's the whole new, that's, let's call it Practice Pilot 2.0,
Practice
that is
Pilot
coming in
2.0.
that is coming in
Okay.
next year, and we're
Wow.
quite excited about that piece.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Okay. And so say a doctor uses Practice Pilot for, 6 months thereabout. What big difference will this make in their practice and in their life?
So I think the big one is a mind shift, and sometimes it doesn't even take up to 6 months. We've had conversations with some doctors where we have just been explaining how Practice Pilot works, and they, from that conversation, can start to connect dots. So one of the key ones that we find people start to connect is that average income per visit, right? So one doctor we spoke with could, when we had a conversation, we were using a demo system, but the capacity of the practice was way lower than the goals. And then she quickly connected that, well, if I increase the average income per visit, that means I can increase my revenue without even increasing the number of patients that I see, right? So
Mm.
when you start to use a system that is presenting a lot of data and insights to you, it starts to change the way you think about your, and again, I say your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because your business is there to make money. You start to think in ways where you can increase your revenue, or indeed um, maximize the resources that you've already have, because a lot of practices are working way below capacity, but they just don't know because there's no
Mm-hmm.
data for them to track. So in 6 months, you should start to see a lot of key things in your businesses and decisions that you can make to shift, whether that be increase your revenue or reduce your cost or maximize the resources that you. And when I say resources, I mean your clinician, the staff that you've got within your business.
That's good. Okay. And then, so why do you think this is a no-brainer for insurance-based practices?
Well, I'll go back to the business side of it. A practice is a business. A business is
Mm-hmm.
there to make money. And if you're not able to see the data that connects all the dots from people walking through the door all the way to your revenue and your goal, etc., then you're missing out on a lot. So I think it's an absolute no-brainer. And you can give it a spin. We've got a 3-month free trial where you can just go in there, put in all your details, and start to use the system. Get your the people that work within your business to input the data, because sometimes that's critical. It creates some sort of ownership when it's actually maybe the front desk person that is putting in that information.
Mm-hmm.
The clinicians have logins into the system, and they themselves can see how they're performing. So you might have a situation where a clinician is underperforming, but they want a pay rise. But they log into the system and they can clearly see the expectation is that I see 20 patients a day, but I'm seeing 14 consistently over 3 months. They will have a conversation with themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
About so it's an absolute no-brainer. I think any practice should have access to a tool like this that gives them insight into the business of their practice, not just the medical side. There are lots of tools out there that handle the medical side of things. A practice pilot is just there to give them good insight into the business of their practice.
Yeah. And so you already mentioned the free trial. So how would people access that? Where would they go?
Yeah, so if you they can go on to practicepilot.io and just sign up. It will automatically activate a free trial for them.
Alrighty. So then do you have any last words, to the private practice people who are listening?
Um, Use the tool.
Use the tool.
get understand your data. I mean, it's and again, like I said, it's not special to private practices. A business is a business. The more you can understand your business, the better you can perform in that business. I had a full year where all I did was understand the data within our real estate marketing business, and it completely changed the way we operated the business. We had some customers that would always complain, "Oh, well, I'm not getting as many inquiries as I expect." But when we started to analyze the data, we could see why that was the case. So it's incredible when you start making data-driven decisions. So yeah, I would encourage anyone that has a private practice to just hop on there. It's free for 3 months. Give it a go. See what you think about it. Yeah,
Okay. And then so you can try that out at practicepilot.io, correct?
that's
Uh,
correct.
Correct. Okay, and so then we'll put that link inside of the bio and underneath the video so that anybody can go ahead and test it out, and they have a free trial for 3 months. 3 months. What is the biggest thing you think they'll get out of this? The entire practice pilot experience. I know it'll change their business and their life, but what do you think is the biggest thing that it'll change?
I think the biggest thing is that mind shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes you don't appreciate how important something is until you start to use it, or
Mm-hmm.
you go down a particular path, right? For anybody that is not paying attention to their data, it will be quite insightful for them to see um, what the data looks like for their practice. One of the things people quickly see, obviously, is, well, I've set this goal, but I don't even have the capacity to meet that goal, right? That's the very first thing that becomes obvious within the software. But over time, it's just is that mind shift where you start to appreciate the value of data within your business and what it can do for you, the changes it can make in your business to give you a better life.
Alrighty. Okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Nam. I'm gonna call you Uncle since you already exposed that you're related to my mother. I'm like, "Oh, Mr. Namdi, I don't know how to say that. So thank you so much, Uncle Namdi, for allowing me to interview you. This has
My
been
pleasure.
amazing. I'm not a tech person, but I may just become a tech person just because of the interview. So we'll see how it goes from there. But to everybody who is watching, please make sure that you share this episode with any private practice docs who are in your life. Do not allow this episode to be your best kept secret. And if you want to try out the 3-month free trial, you go to practicepilot.io to get registered today. And we will see you next time.